Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, Cooking for the Family. I'm Dyvonne, and today I'm going to share with y'all a wonderful recipe for beef stew with dumplings. This is a recipe that I got from my grandmother. It is so good. The family loves it. These are the ingredients that we're going to be using. And in the description box below, under the title where it says more, I will have a list of all the ingredients. When you click on that, the description box will open up. A list of ingredients will be there for your reference. But what I'm going to share with you is how we take those ingredients and put them together to make this awesome beef stew with dumplings. So first what I did was I went on and I chopped up my baby carrots, and then we're going to also be using some nice celery, and we're going to use all these wonderful fresh ingredients. I'm also going to share with you a couple different variations that you can also do with this beef stew. Now with my carrots, I did a half a cup of chopped carrots. I used baby carrots because that's what I had on hand, but you can use baby carrots or regular carrots, and that was a half a cup of that. And also I used 2 celery ribs. I went on and I chopped those up, and that was about a half a cup of the chopped celery ribs. Now when it comes to the onion, I'm using a white onion, but you can use either a white onion or a yellow onion. Either one of those will work just fine. And now I'm going to be using some potatoes. Now you can use, I'm using russet potatoes, but you can also use Yukon Gold potatoes or either white potatoes or new potatoes. These are kind of large. I'm probably going to use about a 1.5 of the potatoes. I probably won't use them all. And so I cut them up about this size. They're about quarter size, about the size of say like a quarter. And I kept them about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick of their thickness. And likewise with my onions, I cut them about that quarter size and about a couple of inches in length. And I used a 1/2 cup of onion. And if you like onion, you can definitely boost that up to a full cup of onion if you prefer. Once I have all of my veggies cut up, then I'm going to go ahead and start working on our beef stew meat. And I have, this is chuck roast, and I have 2 pounds of chuck roast, and it still has a little bit of the fat trimmings are still on there. Now if you have a lot of excess, you can definitely go on and trim those off, but you do want to leave a little bit of the fat on there because that is going to help when we do our next step, and it's also going to help to flavor our stew. So I'm seasoning up, and I'm using kosher salt, and I'm also going to be using some black pepper. And so the kosher salt and the black pepper are going to be perfect to go on and season this up. If you don't have any kosher salt or coarse salt, you can use just regular table salt if you have that. And so you want to season it to your taste. I'm using 2 teaspoons of the coarse kosher salt, and I used 1/4 of a teaspoon of the coarse black pepper. And then I just go in and I use my tongs and I mix everything around and just kind of move it around in my bowl. And then I go ahead and I add a little bit more of my seasoning to come up to about that 1/4 of a teaspoon. And again, you can definitely season it up to your taste. Now next what we're going to do is, in your bowl, you're going to add in some flour. And this is a 1/2 cup of regular all-purpose flour, and I only sprinkle in a little bit at a time. Now with my beef stew meat, what I did was I rinsed it in cold water. Once I rinsed it in cold water, then I went on and I dried my beef stew meat on my paper towels, and then I went on and I put my beef stew meat in my bowl, because you want your beef stew meat to be nice and dry before you add any seasoning to your meat and before we add the flour. Because if your meat is really moist, when you add the flour to it, it's just going to start to become very gummy. And so we want it to be like just a nice dry flour onto our meat. We want it to adhere, and we don't want it to be a big sticky mess, and so you don't want it to kind of gum up on you. And so in order for that not to happen, you need to make sure that you've rinsed your meat really good in cold water, and then you've dried it with your paper towels, and before then you add it to your bowl to season it, and you put your flour on it. So once we have our flour is on our meat, then we're going to go ahead and start to sear it off. This is going to create some wonderful flavor for our beef stew. It's also going to start to build up a nice, wonderful roux in our pot. And I'm going to share with you and show you what I mean with that. So I went on and I put some vegetable oil, and I just put a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil. Now we will be adding a little bit more vegetable oil as we start to sear off our pieces of our beef chuck roast. When I'm adding my meat to the pot, I'm going to be mindful not to overcrowd the pot with too much meat, because what can happen is instead of the meat searing and starting to get like a nice little crust on each side, the meat will start to steam and you're not going to get that nice crust to build up that nice fond. And we're going to build up a lot of fond in the bottom of my pot. And so in order to do that, you want to make sure that you don't overcrowd your pot with too many pieces. So I am going to be searing off my meat in a few batches. So once it's seared on the side, and it usually takes maybe a couple minutes, about a minute or two per side, and you just kind of go ahead and flip it. And you don't necessarily have to do every single side, but you want to do like the bigger sides of your meat and just go ahead and sear it. And so that way you start to get that nice crust as well as that nice fond is going to build up on the bottom. And fond is those droppings, those pieces that you see there, those brown pieces. We're going to be building up a really nice portion of fond right there. Now, if you are new to my channel, welcome in. And if you're a returner, welcome back. I thank you all for your likes, your shares, your subscribes, your good vibe comments. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And if you are here and have not subscribed to my channel yet, I hope you enjoy my content and consider subscribing. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the last couple batches of our beef stew meat, finish searing it off. Now, as you see, we're building up a lot more fond is coming in the bottom, and we're going to have even more that's going to be built up. I'm using my Dutch oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven pot like I'm using, you definitely want to use a heavy bottom pot. And you see how it's turned a nice dark rich brown. You want it to be a nice dark rich brown, but you don't want it to be burned. And I have my flame on a medium high heat, so it's a medium to high heat. If yours is starting to burn, go on and reduce your heat to more of a medium low. Now, once we've done searing off the meat, I add in our chopped vegetables right on top. And then I'm going to put in, I have my beef broth that I have. And it's the beef broth that I use for making with bouillon, the beef bouillon. And so I went on and I just put in about 3/4 of a cup, just enough that we can start to work up those bits from the bottom of our pot. And you see how I'm just using my wooden spoon. I'm going around and I'm just working up those bits. Those toasty brown bits, that fond, is going to give our stew amazing flavor. But in addition to that, it's also going to thicken our stew. And so now I'm going to go ahead and let my vegetables simmer just for a little bit, just to kind of start to get a little bit soft. And so you see how we're going to let it simmer. And so just let it simmer for about maybe 5 minutes. Now, once my veggies have simmered for about 5 minutes, and you see it's also thickened up just a little bit, and it's almost like a veggie slurry that we've made, and it's just looking really good. The vegetables have gotten softer, and we have created a wonderful base for our beef stew. Now I'm going to add in 1 clove of chopped garlic, and I already had chopped the garlic and I had it to the side. I'm going to mix the garlic, my chopped garlic, in with the other vegetables, and I'm going to let this simmer with the other vegetables just for a couple of minutes so my garlic will have a chance just to kind of soften up a bit. Now, once I'm letting this go ahead and simmer, and I did turn my fire down just a little bit so that way it could just go ahead and simmer. Now I'm adding my meat back into the pot, the meat that we had seared off. And remember, our meat wasn't 100% cooked through. We just seared it. And so it's going to continue to cook and it's going to stew, because chuck roast, in order to really make it nice and tender, the meat really has to stew for a while. And so we're really going to let this stew for a bit. So once I add that in, I went on and also added in the rest of the beef broth that I have. I'm going to add in 1 bay leaf. And total with the beef broth, I added in 2.5 cups of beef broth. And I used the Knorr's bouillon to make my beef broth. So I'm going to put a top on it. I'm going to raise my fire up, and I raised it so that way it can start to come to a boil. Our stew has come to a boil. It looks really good. It's starting to slightly thicken up some. I'm going to put the top back on, and now I'm going to reduce my heat to a low, and I'm going to let the stew simmer for about an hour or till it's nice and tender. That's going to take you around about an hour, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and 10 minutes. So our stew has continued to thicken up. Let's see how our meat is looking. The meat is looking good. I can tell just by the look of it that it's really starting to get nice and tender, and that's what you want. Stew is something that it's a nice process of just like slow stewing your meat to become nice and tender, and all those wonderful flavors just come together in your pot. Now that I have 4 ounces of sliced mushroom, and I'm using white mushrooms. The mushrooms are optional, so if you don't care for mushrooms, you can definitely leave them out. Then I'm going to put in my potatoes. I'm only going to use about 3/4 of the potatoes that I had cut up. And I'm also going to add an additional 1/2 cup of water. Once I get my potatoes all poked down into my pot, I'm going to add an additional 1/2 cup of water, so that way we make sure we have enough water for our potatoes to cook and stew with the rest of the meat. I'm going to put the top on my pot. I'm going to let it continue to simmer until our potatoes become nice and tender. Our stew is looking so good. It's smelling so good in the kitchen. Our potatoes have become nice and tender. They're looking great, y'all. And this pot, let me tell you, this pot, we have filled it with some love. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste for seasoning. I'm going to add a little bit more salt, and I'm also going to add a little bit more pepper for seasoning. And at this point is when you want to go ahead and season it to your taste. Go ahead and stir in our seasoning. I'm going to stir it in just like that. And then now that we have everything and it's looking like this, now I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my bay leaf, because our bay leaf has done its job. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out of the pot. I'm going to put a little bit of parsley, and that's also optional, but I like to add a little bit of chopped parsley. And so just about a couple of tablespoons of chopped parsley. If you don't have any fresh parsley, you can definitely use some dried parsley, just about a tablespoon of dried parsley. Now, while my pot is on a low heat and it's still simmering, we're going to go ahead and put together some dumplings real quick. I'm using some Bisquick, and we're going to be putting in 1.5 cups of Bisquick. Our beef stew is ready to go, and it can be enjoyed exactly how we have it now. It is ready to be enjoyed right out of the pot, but we're going to put a little extra to it, and this is going to be the dumplings. So once I have the 1.5 cups of the Bisquick, then I'm going to add some dried thyme, and I'm going to be adding 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. And once I add the dried thyme to the Bisquick, I just go ahead and mix that. So that way we want to make sure that the thyme and the dry ingredients of the Bisquick is together. Then we're going to add in 1/2 cup of milk. And it's just those ingredients, just the dried thyme, the Bisquick, and the milk. That 1/2 cup of milk, I'm using 2% milk, but you can use 2% milk or whole milk. And we're just going to continue to mix and moist. And we're going to make a little dough, just like I'm doing there. And you just want to mix and press until the dough comes together and forms a ball in the center of your bowl, and there's no more dry Bisquick. And that just takes just a few minutes just to kind of press, just like I'm doing there. Now also with your beef stew, if you wanted to leave out the potatoes, and this is something I've done before as well when I've made beef stew, where I'll leave out the potatoes and I'll actually make mashed potatoes on the side. I'll double up my vegetables, and then I'll serve the beef stew on top of mashed potatoes. So that's one way. And also another way that I've also done it is I'll leave out the potatoes, I'll double up on my vegetables, and then I'll serve my beef stew over white rice. That's actually one of my husband's favorite, to have it over white rice. Our dough is ready. It's a little sticky, and you see how the texture is. It's just like a little sticky, just like that. And then what I do is I take the big dough and I'm going to break it into pieces. I'm going to end up getting 6 dumplings from the dough. You can make them smaller if you'd like. I'm making them about 1/2 inch thick and about as round as a baseball. Not too much bigger than the round width of a baseball. And so I'm going to make 6 of them, and they are going to also expand as they cook on top of our stew. They're going to expand as well. And when I make my stew and I leave out the potatoes and I make it with mashed potatoes or with the white rice, I also don't make the dumplings that day either. So our dumplings are ready. I'm going to add them to our pot. Now before I add my dumplings, I'm going to stir my pot, and I'm also going to raise the temperature on my pot, the flame from a low where it was simmering while I was making the dumplings. I'm going to raise it to a medium because I want to build up a little bit more heat in the pot before I put the top back on the pot. And so I go ahead and I just layer the dumplings right on top of the stew. Now once I have the dumplings layered on top, and I remember I went on and I raised my pot a little bit just to kind of have it come a little bit more heat, get a little bit more heat. Then I put the top on the pot, and then I'm going to lower the heat back to that low temperature. This is going to cook for about 10 to 12 minutes. So it's been about 12 minutes, and you see how our dumplings have puffed up now. They have puffed up nicely. And then what you want to do is I'm going to insert my tester. When your tester comes out clean, your dumplings are nice and cooked through in the inside. Some fresh parsley, and then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to service up some. I'm going to put first some of the stew, and I could just feel the potatoes are just nice and tender. The meat is looking good. It's smelling good. I'm going to put some dumpling as well in there. And it's time for us to give our dinner a taste. Dumplings are nice and fluffy. They are cooked through and through. They are going to go so great with our beef stew, our wonderful gravy that we have created with the potatoes and with the beef. I've got your bite ready. This is your bite right here. Go ahead and take your bite. Now I'm going to take my bite and see how we did. Oh my goodness. Our beef is nice and tender. This is just that good home cooking. It came out so good. But you know what? Anytime I make this beef stew, it does not disappoint. Well, I thank you for spending time with me today in my kitchen. I invite you to hit that subscribe button, show this video some love, give it a thumbs up, and click share, and share this video with a friend or family. Well, that is it for me today, y'all. And remember, it's always good when Dyvonne is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.